Hello. So now we're going to be talking about the NC-1.
Or more specifically, the Navy gas mask type NC model A-1.
Or as everyone else calls it, the NC-1. Um, anyway, we're talking about this, which is basically a panoramic cheek filter KTM, or COPS type. But, so, more on the background of the device, is that this was developed in the early days of World War II, and most examples like this one will be dated 1941. We'll get to that example more in a bit. That's a later version. And they were designed for civilians working for the Navy. This is going to amaze a lot of you, but there are people who sail in ships and work in shipyards who are not uh, members of the Navy or members of the armed forces. And this mask was developed using the, what do you call these, M12?
Yeah, it uses the same M12 canisters as the M6-12-8 dog gas mask, which is very interesting. And it was originally designed as a sort of shipyard, merchant mariner counterpart to the M1 non-combatant series, except these are much higher quality, given the fact that it uses standard MSA manufacturing techniques. Most notably,
These were all made by MSA, by the way.
yes. So he mentioned that it is very similar to the COPS type, and just to make a comparison, here is a MSA COPS type, which is a Polmasan, which was this one was marketed by Polmasan, but it's made by MSA, and as you can see, it is the same material, same harness tabs. I could show that off better. I probably will in a moment, but yeah, same harness tabs, similar head harness material, except this one's better quality actually. Stockinette is the same color as I mentioned, and pretty much just all standard manufacturing techniques. Like I said, it's essentially just a panoramic KTM with side filters.
Which we mostly think the panoramic idea was actually to save a lot of money, because this is literally, we'll show you on the side, it's literally sewn in, and then they slap the stockinette over. This is very easy to make. And interestingly, it does still have deflectors on both sides, actually.
Yeah, the deflectors are interesting because they are integrally molded, but it still uses a chin seam, which means it is a semi-molded facepiece.
Yeah. Now, real quick, before we get down to the actual internal components, one of the other things to mention is that, as stated, this is a 1943 dated one, and it has some interesting features. This is a standard one, almost always dated 41 or 42. This is a 43. You'll notice that these cheek filters are the same as you would see on an MSA ComfoFit half mask respirator.
It just has some felt membranes inside or of some sort, and it uses those instead of the M12 filters. And the reason this is because Moulage and me at this point speculate that because these were seeing more use for industrial purposes, MSA decided to make an industrial variant, seeing as that they were already supplying these.
Well, more accurately, what I was thinking is that the people in the shipyards, instead of keeping these on a shelf, realized that they were good against nuisance dusts and maybe kind of as pseudo eye goggles, and so they even made it so you could replace this external lens, so that basically while you were still beating the shit out of these, you could still get some decent usage out of them. This is the only one that we know of that's like this.
It could very well be experimental, but we're not going to go that far to say that.
Yeah, it could have just been a trial run that didn't go very far. It's really difficult to speculate on these kind of things because we have no data to back it up.
Yeah, and these are getting a bit harder to find in decent condition, unfortunately. Even, they're mostly found in unissued condition typically, but most of the time the flutter valves, as you can see, this one, it looks good from the front, but as you can see on the back, it is completely torn up, and this one is completely shredded. The harnesses, like on this one, are completely devoid of all elasticity, and they are very stringy and loose, and even this one, it's just way more harness than it needs, so it's beginning to get that stage where it's like no longer elastic. But these are becoming uncommon. And a final thing to mention before I move on to the interior is that these were almost definitely used as the inspiration or for the Navy Diaphragm Mark V mask, and there's even a photo from MIT Labs showing a timeline of Navy masks with this mask alongside the Mark IV Navy Diaphragm to sort of elude the inspiration to the Mark V.
It's also worth saying they usually come with this kind of, it's cheap, but it works. It kind of just hooks around the two filters. It's kind of a nice face shield. This one kept its. It's been had the shit beat out of it, but the mask is in good shape.
Anyhow, moving on to the interior of the face piece, we can, before we do that, first we should mention the harness is the typical M4 self-centering style harness. However, the stitching pattern is a little bit different, as you can see. Well, you may not be able to know, but on the M1 non-combatants, there is usually a few polygon-shaped sewing boxes on each point where the straps cross over each other, whereas the NC-1 here, they just did a double row of stitching all the way around in a triangular pattern. So that's the main thing to point out, different from the M4 self-centering harness. And then now I will reverse the harness and show off the interior, because there's a few things I mentioned inside there.
It's pretty interesting. It doesn't have the texture of the original.
Yeah, so, again, very similar to the Cops type. It still has the same lozenge-shaped fabric patches to cover the seams on the harness. However, interestingly, the sewing does not go through the fabric as on the Cops type. It is simply sewn through the rubber and then just covered with the patches of fabric. You may also notice the integrally molded Tissot deflectors, or hopefully you can. It's kind of hard to see on camera.
It's that shape right there.
Yeah, those two little half lozenge-shaped things are integrally molded.
They're kind of similar to the ones in the M40, the MCU, except these are integral instead of popping out.
Yes, pretty much. And as you might be able to see how the eyepiece is sewn into the rubber of the mask, and it is slightly textured because there is fabric embedded in the rubber around this region for additional reinforcement, so that the thread does not tear through the actual face piece material itself. That's really all there is to see. I believe these didn't last all that long post-war. They might have been around for a brief period, but they pretty much kind of died down after World War II was over.
Once you issue stuff to merchant mariners, they kind of just use it until it breaks or they find something better.
Yeah, so we don't really know how long these were around specifically, but they seem to have been... They definitely were around for the entirety of World War II and probably shortly after for a brief period. And that's really all there is to see about these. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, or concerns, drop them down in the comments below. And if you have any final notes, Moulash?
No, it is what it is. It's a good little half mask. Because it covers half the head. Yeah, I'm running with this. Because you see this half of your head's not covered, but this half is, so it's a half mask. We're done here.